S-P-E-A-K. Everybody wanna say, speak up. S-P-E-A-K. Speak up.
Principia Mathematica, 1687, Isaac Newton.
Nature and nature's laws lay hid in night. God said, "Let Newton be," and all was light.
In that brilliant couplet, Alexander Pope, the supreme poet of his day, summed up the awe felt by everyone who could grasp what Newton had done. There were those who were prepared to call him a god, and indeed, as well as bringing him in his own lifetime and since the support of the most accomplished minds in science, his work also gathered flocks of followers who saw him as the source of solutions to the meaning of life. Newton's fame and importance are still as strong today, and despite his disclaimer that if I have seen further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants, there are those, not least Einstein, whose ideas refined and extended, but by no means diminished, the achievement of Newton.
Nature to him was an open book. He stands before us, strong, certain, and alone.
Newton was born on Christmas Day in 1642, 3 months after his father had died. When he was 3, his mother moved out to live with a wealthy rector in a parish nearby, and for the next 8 years of his life, he was brought up by his maternal grandmother. There was an uncle, educated at Cambridge, who helped this unusually clever, self-driven, solitary boy on his way by getting him in his teens to Grantham Grammar School, where the headmaster, Henry Stokes, was notable for raising the level of scholarship to that of a university. So when Newton arrived at Trinity College, Cambridge, in 1661, he was well grounded in classics and mathematics. In 1664, he wrote,
"Plato is my friend, Aristotle is my friend, but my best friend is truth."
His colours were nailed to the mast. It was as if he gave notice to himself that his great journey was begun. At Cambridge, Newton took up another study, that of alchemy, which he was to pursue as zealously as he pursued his physics. As the influence of alchemy, called the Hermetic tradition, grew stronger, Newton's concept of nature underwent a crucial change. He had been entirely what could be termed a mechanical philosopher in the accepted 17th century style, one who explained natural phenomena by the motions of particles of matter. But influenced by the Hermetic tradition, he began to use the language of alchemists to describe puzzling phenomena such as chemical affinities. Unlikely as it seems, this combination proved fruitful, a match between the magical and the mechanical. By combining these two apparently irreconcilable states of knowledge and reconciling them through the concept of force, it has been said that Newton made his ultimate contribution to science. He sought out sources of knowledge everywhere he could. Robert Boyle, the 17th century chemist, was to give Newton the basis for his work in chemistry. A study of Descartes set him off on the latest mathematics. He learned about algebraic techniques which could be applied to geometry. Again and again, Newton seems to be reaching out for a theory of everything. In 1665, the plague came back to England in force. Those who could fled the towns and cities, seeking out isolated spots thought to be safest from the fatal infection. The University of Cambridge closed down, and at the age of 23, Newton returned to his home, to Woolsthorpe. Out of the next 2 years grew the legend, and to a certain extent a myth, of the making of his unique genius. In those 2 years, in his early 20s, he laid the groundwork for many of his great contributions to knowledge. It was at this time that he experimented with the prism, and decided that white light was composed of different colored lights and different properties. It was not that he merely saw this rainbow spectrum, as many had done before him. He proved why it was so, and what the consequences were for the study of light itself, and proved it by an early example of what is now cutting edge, particle physics. And then there was the apple tree. Still there, at Grantham, the tree itself, or its direct heir, propped up and gnarled, but defiant, as if it is damned if it will give in until everyone takes a careful look and agrees to believe its story. It was put about by Newton himself that it was the simple fall of an apple almost as famous as the apple in the Garden of Eden, that set him off and directed his mind to the thought which led to his stupendous theory of the force of gravity. Newton returned to Cambridge in 1667, and in the next 20 years, besides thinking through his law of gravity, he engaged in many other investigations, had titanic and virulent quarrels with those who dared challenge or criticize him, turned friends into enemies overnight, damned publication, grew to be a monster and a myth, and had a truly terrible nervous breakdown, after which he did less and less science in Cambridge and became more and more a national monument in the capital and a figure of international wonder. In 1684, the wealthy, enterprising and talented British astronomer Edmund Halley went to see Newton in Cambridge with a problem about a planet's orbit. In response, Newton wrote a short tract, De Motu, on the motion of bodies in orbit, which revealed how far he had got in quantifying the movements of the planets. Halley was so impressed and excited when he read this that he raced down to Cambridge and urged Newton to publish immediately, a publication for which he would pay. But Newton was not ready. More than that, the writing of De Motu had somehow nudged forward the progress of a big idea. De Motu was just book one. He put all other work aside, scarcely went out, barely ate, and settled to it with that astonishing concentration and stamina that made him able to think on it continuously for up to 20 hours a day. He covered hundreds of sheets of manuscript with new calculations, which became the Principia, with a book 2 and a book 3. The reservoir, built up with so much application and genius and over such a span of work time, was now released into a river of verifiable proofs, which was to sweep all before it. Never before, and never since, had one mind discovered so much that was new and made such a profound and unending difference to our knowledge, and to the way we would live our lives. The chief way in which the Principia changed the world was to add so much and so majestically to our knowledge of the universe. Newton extended the boundaries of thought dramatically. Subsequently, often standing on his shoulders, almost 3 centuries of scientific investigation has been launched. With regard to light, ideas on which had moved on very little from Aristotle, Newton revised the notion that the separation of colors through a prism targeted with white light was due to the glass somehow modifying the beam, and proved that the white light beam was made up of 7 distinct types of moving particles, each with distinct properties that cannot be modified. These findings became the foundation of the science of physical optics. The laws of motion seem to be the critical issue in unlocking the secrets of natural law, and once again Aristotle's views still largely obtained before Newton. Galileo had challenged these ideas, for example, that heavier objects fall faster than lighter ones, but it was Newton whose experiments uncovered the organizing principle. As you would expect, there are varying emphases on the changes brought about by the Principia. For example, the distinguished historian of science John Gribbin does not believe in the genius theory of the history of science, nor that there are, or were, special persons whose contribution was climactically transforming. Only for Newton does he make an exception.
There are 3 laws of motion and the theory of gravity, all in the Principia. They underpin everything from building the 4th bridge so that it will not go down when a train goes across it, to sending a spaceship to Jupiter. And of course for that you also need the law of gravity.
In the communications industry, Newton's orbital mechanics are behind the workings of satellites. His work on the propagation of waves, in particular their application to determine the velocity of sound, gave us the supersonic aircraft and ultrasonic scanning. Newton's invention of the reflecting telescope led to the periscope, and from his study of light come optical fibers, which carry light for extremely long distances. His celestial dynamics still determine the orbit of our space vehicles. Despite the intellectual contributions of others, most notably Einstein, over the last 300 years, the new world created by the Principia still works, still explains the world, and the later contributions are more refinements than refutations of a work still acknowledged as supreme. It is not always sensible to trust comments that people make about themselves, but this sentence by Newton, written at the end of his life, seems to capture the spirit of that lonely, curious boy on the Lincolnshire farm whose appetite for learning was to change so much.
I do not know what I may appear to the world, but to myself I seem to have been only like a boy playing on the seashore, and diverting myself now and then finding a smoother pebble or a prettier shell than ordinary, whilst the great ocean of truth lay all unknown before me.
On today's programme in the series English Law, we have with us Judge Stevens, a well-known judge who has some very strong views on community service.
That's right. I firmly believe that wider use of community service could save the taxpayer a lot of money. The reason for this is that prisons today are becoming more and more overcrowded, making them increasingly expensive to run.
I see. You mean that if fewer people were sent to prison, less tax money would be needed as there would be fewer prisons.
Yes, exactly. Another point I'd like to make is that the community can also benefit from a social point of view. For example, offenders are often required to carry out painting and building work, help in caring for the elderly, maintaining public parks, and so on.
Of course that would be beneficial. In a way, it would be services at no cost at all to the community.
Right. Furthermore, it is important to remember that we are not talking about dangerous criminals, but people who are trying to change their lives for the better. However, prison life can actually turn these minor offenders into hardened criminals, simply in order to survive.
So what you're saying is that from a personal viewpoint, prison sentences can be damaging because minor offenders are often forced to become like the other inmates.
Yes, and I'd like to make one more point, if I may. Community service can be particularly positive from a psychological point of view, since prisoners often find it difficult to lead normal lives after they leave prison. For instance, minor offenders who do community service still remain part of society and can do everything they did before they were convicted.
So they still live at home with their families, keep their jobs, and so on and so forth. Yes, I understand how that is good for their self-confidence. I hope that our listeners will support your views.
This story was written by Rachel Jackson. How to shop less, cook the food you have, waste less, and eat well. Between rising food prices and the growing environmental catastrophe of food waste, we have good reasons to eat what we have and throw away only what's absolutely necessary. But in the rush of everyday life and habits, that's hard. So hard that the non-profit ReFed estimates that nearly half of food waste in the United States happens in households. That's the leftovers people were tired of, the spinach turned to mush in the crisper drawer, and for me, gulp, the granola bars I bought just in case, and didn't tear open until they were inedibly stale. It adds up, especially as ReFed also estimates that about a third of food in the United States every year gets trashed, squandering farming, processing and transit resources, and belching potent greenhouse gases in landfills. Composting can lighten the landfill load, but the biggest solution we consumers can deploy is simple and mystifying all at once. We need to buy less food. So, an Earth Month challenge. Next time you're about to make a grocery run, stop. Open your cabinets, scan your fridge, poke around in your freezer. And while we're at it, scrap your next I don't have time to cook delivery order for a spread of this is what we had in the fridge. For most of us, the food is there. We just need to eat it. Chances are, we can eat it and eat well, all while saving money and time. But how do you work with what you have when you feel like you have nothing to work with? Here's some guidance from my low-waste kitchen. Find the food. No need to do an exhaustive inventory, but run through this list for help seeing the possibilities, and not the limitations, of delaying your next shopping run. Use your Get Out of Cooking free card. Did you stock canned soup and pre-made meals for a rainy day? Today's the day. Have loads of frozen leftovers? Defrost some frozen mystery blobs. But if there's no ready-made container of minestrone in your freezer, then round up your plants. Scan for fruits and vegetables first because few of us eat enough of them, and fresh ones go bad quickly. Prioritize any that are drooping or wrinkling. Pitch slimy ones. Otherwise, how about leftovers, canned or frozen veggies, and even pickles or dried fruit? Find a protein. Eggs cook quickly and transform nearly anything into a meal. Dollops of Greek yogurt or cottage cheese have similar powers. Canned beans with a few wrist flicks can anchor a dinner. Maybe you have protein-heavy leftovers that aren't quite a full meal, or quick prep proteins such as lunch meat or frozen fish sticks. Identify starches and meal stretchers. Do you have rice, pasta, bread, maybe frozen and forgotten, or that interesting grain you haven't made yet? Shout out to the Pharaoh in my cabinet. You're up soon. Cheese and nuts, of course, make everything better, and not enough for a meal pizza can be a side dish. Get saucy. Raid your jars and bottles, starting with the most neglected. Scan your spice rack. Tip: mix mayo with herbs, and if you'd like, thin with water, pickle juice, or another liquid for an instant sauce. Olive oil swirled with herbs and a sprinkle of sea salt always wins on bread. Assess. Are you looking at a charcuterie-style spread? A pasta dish of everything we had in the fridge, sautéed and seasoned with that sauce we never use? Sandwiches, maybe open-faced if you don't have enough bread, maybe with green beans instead of greens. Sounds weird, tastes delicious. Last night's takeout bulked up with some frozen veggies? Not quite enough fish, veggies and rice topped with a handful of now it's a filling meal pepitas? Accept imperfection. When you're improvising, inevitably some meals won't be amazing. Still, you'll use up food, save money, and build your skills. I say, that's a win. Or, as Margaret Lee and Irene Lee, authors of Perfectly Good Food, a totally achievable zero-waste approach to home cooking, like to say, eat the evidence and move on. Speaking of imperfection, remember, date labels, especially best by dates, are often based on peak quality, and sometimes foods that aren't picture perfect are fine to eat. My website, Eat or Toss, features science-based guidance to help sort through uncertainty. Look for inspiration. An increasing number of low-waste books, websites, and food social media influencers can assist. The Lee Sisters Cookbook features whimsically titled recipes, such as cream of anything soup and choose-your-own-adventure vegetable paella. In the Everlasting Meal Cookbook, Leftovers AZ, author Tamar Adler offers an encyclopedia of use-it-all inspiration. The entry for Fish Overcooked gives a short recipe for a pasta dish. Under pizza crusts, Adler suggests cubing them for a sausage bake. Her last chapter describes dips, drinks, and dishes you can summon from the final bits clinging to jars of foods such as maple syrup, miso paste, and mustard. Washington Post recipes editor Becky Crystal offered a guide to such kitchen clear-out classics as soups, pastas, and stir-fries. Shop more efficiently. Ideally, using what you have results in fewer trips to the store. But when you do go shopping, plan and make your list based on what you need to use up. Recently, inspired by a staggering collection of soy sauce packets and a bag of coconut flakes that tasted fine but whose best-by date shall remain undisclosed, I bought a block of tofu. We had coconut tofu for dinner, and I'm closer to using up that coconut in those packets. Also, try to stock a small stash of foods with meal-conjuring powers. This will look different for everyone, but for me, that's eggs, because they go with everything. Frozen vegetables because they're healthful and don't spoil. Apples because they're a fresh fruit that lasts in the fridge, and beloved spice blends because they're flavor shortcuts. I also usually have some frozen bread, keeping me a few toaster oven beeps away from a sandwich, or a supporting roll, for a salad. Be realistic at the supermarket too. It's easy to feel ambitious inside a store filled with bright produce and enticing packages. But if you only seriously cook one night a week, your haul should reflect that. And if you notice your produce is routinely going bad before you can cook it, buy less and create a specific plan for using what you do buy. If your desire to avoid overpurchasing is bumping up against your goals of eating more fruits and vegetables, the freezer aisle can help you fill in the gaps. Sales and buying in bulk can be great, as long as you use your purchases. Buy 2, get 1 free is only a deal if you'll eat all 3 while they're still fresh, which is not always easy for certain types of produce, such as lettuce. I once learned the hard way that a relatively low unit price on smoked fish dip only matters if your household eats the stuff by the pound. Make it fun. Enlist kids, partners, and roommates to make use-it-all cooking a fun, creative challenge. At our house, nights when we pull everything out of the fridge for a buffet are known as a repast or scavenge, depending on whether we're feeling fancy or mischievous. Laura Kuhlman, my friend and a cookbook author, calls such dinners a mitzvah meal. If you're serving kids, consider a muffin pan dinner, in which small quantities of whatever needs eating fill each cup. Maybe this should be my next move for granola bars on the brink. Buying less food is liberating. It saves time in the store, time unloading, time throwing away, and time hauling to the curb. It also, of course, saves money and can help cultivate kitchen clarity. When your fridge's shelves are more clear and your mind is freed from the blinding glare of everything you could ever want at the supermarket, you start to see things. A bundle of parsley, raisins, and lemon juice sing together in a fast and bright salad. English muffins embrace new identities in sandwiches. The whole grain mustard a houseguest left behind transforms into an unexpected sauce. A pour of pickle juice is the shot of acid, flavor, and moisture that a bland, dry dish needs. Of course, I'm sharing what I've found works for me and others, but I don't know your kitchen and your habits. Maybe you're a precision meal planner and never need a clear-the-fridge night. Maybe you expertly deploy an eat-me-first box, and it has been all you needed to use up stragglers before they go slimy or fuzzy. If you've solved your personal food waste puzzle, or even if you simply have a great waste-fighting recipe you're itching to share, tell me. Tell everyone, because there are literally millions of pounds of food stranded in our homes. We really, truly just need to eat it. Rachel Jackson is a DC-based writer and the founder of eatertoss.com. Reach her at rachel@eatertoss.com.
We'll see you next time for more exciting and helpful videos to help you master your speaking fluency through our listening sessions. Thank you for being with us.